Good afternoon, everyone. Looks like I may have been proven right again. Hello, welcome to the Caleb Landis Show. We have a couple of big news items for you, as always. We have Trump's election integrity speech. I know you know pretty much the content of it by now. We're going to talk a little bit about what to do now that Trump has made this information public. We have some reality checks, some about Trump wins and some about liberal violence. So we'll get into that. And we have the first ever movie review of the Caleb Landis Show. So let's jump right into it. But before we do, no, I do not have my first sponsor to announce. But I would like to put out a suggestion to all of my my loyal viewers out there, as people like to call them. I tried some new things with camera angle, camera placement, and lighting and stuff today. I don't know if I like it or not. To be honest, I don't see a whole lot of difference between what I see on the camera in front of me now and what I have seen in previous episodes. So I'm putting out the call for a young, hungry, budding producer, or, well, you don't have to be young, but that was the image that seemed to fit in my head. I am looking for someone to help on the show. So if you know how to make this show look better and are willing to do so for free and on my schedule, unfortunately, then reach out to me. Maybe you can get some valuable job experience, or maybe you just believe in the message that we are producing on this show, and you want to enhance the communication power of this show through the technical producer, podcasting, camera, lighting, all that good stuff side of this endeavor. Really, the only difference between me and you is that my job allows me to have the time to do this, right? To have the time to be the host of a podcast. But it's not like I have any particular skill set or even set of equipment, right? This stuff is borrowed. So, well, not borrowed, but I'm allowed to use this stuff. So, uh, yeah, if you're interested in helping us, I would love to look into growing the Caleb Landis Show uh, through your gracious volunteer work. Now, let's get into the actual meat and potatoes of the show. Reality checks, formerly known as Trump wins on this show, but we're going to expand the segment a little bit from facts that show that what I have told you about the success of Trump 2.0 is actually correct, to include kind of the negative side of that too. I will prove to you facts that demonstrate the success of Trump's endeavors to this point, because they often get ignored by many places in the media. But I will also show you, whenever I come across them, little tidbits of reality that remind you that what I am telling you about liberalism is true, especially the ones that people push back against me the most on social media. The comments that where you disagree with me, that's perfectly fine. I mean, it enhances my algorithm reach, right? When people are talking back and forth, where I post a show. But the goal of what we're doing here is to help you see reality and be willing to accept it. Right. So that's what we're calling this new segment. We usually open the show with reality checks. First, some ICE numbers released yesterday. These were released by ICE, through official government channels. Hat tip to Bill Malugin on X for kind of summarizing these numbers for me. So far in fiscal year, got my numbers written down here, fiscal year 2026, which would be since October 1st, 389 deportations in fiscal year 2026. That averages out to about 1,260 per day. So, yes, deportations continue to happen. Yes, we want to deport faster. Both things can be true. But let's not say that nothing is happening, because 356,389 since October 1st is not nothing. And it's a lot better than what we have been getting prior to this. There are 65,765 people currently in ICE custody, and of that 65,000 plus, 39,576 have already been convicted of a crime, presumably uh, a crime beyond just illegal entry. They have already been convicted of a crime, or there are charges pending. 30, almost 40 out of the 66,000 currently in ICE custody. Sounds like the kind of people that we would want out of our country for at least two reasons: illegal entry and the second crime once they got here. Now, here is the really interesting stuff about this, right? Well, how does this compare to what Trump 2.0 was doing at other times throughout the administration? I hear a lot about how much, especially on X, conservative commentators on X, how much they want the days of January and February of this year back in Minnesota when Bavino, I believe I'm saying his name correctly, Greg Bavino was in charge. You remember the riots, right? Some of them turned deadly. It was a tragic situation. It was a very aggressive public posturing time for ICE and our deportation approach, right? And I hear a lot of people say that we should go back to that. And since that time, deportations have plummeted. And a lot of this comes from the kind of podcastistan doomer world. Not all of it, because there was a dip in deportations in between the winter and now. However, in June in June alone, we had 43,000 ICE arrests, which is the highest number of arrests per month so far in Trump's second administration, even higher than that very public surge in January and February back in Minnesota. And July so far may actually be on pace to break that record that June has just set. So, are we satisfied? No. Do we want more? Yes. But is nothing happening? Absolutely not. Is Trump bailing on his promises? Absolutely not. In fact, he's performing on his promises, and this deportation situation being his most important, at an increasing rate. So just a little reality check there, the kind of good news about Trump that you often don't get anywhere else. Now, what about the reality check in the bad sense? Well, that would be the attack on the federal facility in New York. It had several federal offices in it. One of them was an ICE facility there. We have a suspect in custody. Looked like it was gas or some kind of flammable liquid that they poured in a giant puddle in front of the door and set on fire. It was a terroristic attack, as far as I'm concerned, against Trump in general, the government. And when you see that it's an ICE facility, well, that fits quite nicely into the pattern of anti-ICE violence that we consistently see throughout the American left. In fact, it appears that the suspect, the alleged firebomber, was actually making statements to that effect, that he was interested in overthrowing the government. Now, there's a lot about this that I don't know yet, so I'm not going to comment too much on this. This person is innocent until proven guilty, but I have seen enough to make me suspect that this is very much yet another leftist attack, which I find ironic because we were just talking about that. In our last episode, how the pattern of violence on the American left, and it doesn't seem to be going away. It appears at this point that we have yet another instance of a leftist, anti-ICE, anti-Trump type of person A person who is unhappy with what our current government is doing, deciding to use violence and the threat of violence to attempt to cause political change rather than what we on the right almost always do, which is talk to people, engage with people. And what we on this show do, we present reasons for you to change your mind. We don't attack you. Looks like we have yet another example, it looks like, of a leftist person doing that. We could be in for an interesting reality check there. We'll see. I'm speculating a little bit on the air, which I usually don't like to do, but I also don't want to just ignore the fact that this is happening, given that that this event happened, given that it has so many earmarks of fitting into the pattern that we discuss so much here on this show. So those are your reality checks for today. Hopefully you have news sources in your life that will show you that information elsewhere. But hey, if I'm the only place that you come for this good news about Trump and bad news about the left, at least you're getting it somewhere, right? Now, what about Trump's election integrity speech the other day? So that was a pretty big deal to me because not so much the stuff that Trump said was happening, because a lot of what he said was taking place. He has already said was taking place, right? That stuff wasn't particularly new. What was new is that he this time declassified intelligence reports that have led him to believe what he has always believed about the vulnerability of our election system and the foreign interference angle, which was by far the most eye-opening part to me. Now, I am going to say something here at the beginning of our discussion of this issue that for those of you leftists who are listening to me, and some of you more establishment right type people who are listening to me, you may want to instinctively turn off the show after I make this statement, or at least kind of write off everything I have to say when I make this next statement. But I am going to strongly encourage you to not do that. And I'm going to tell you that if that is your instinct after you hear this next statement, then you are have been made part of the problem that we have with election integrity here in this country through some very bad information, or possibly just some bad faith on your part, some unwillingness to believe in reality on your part. So, are you ready for this statement, this shocker of a statement? Here it comes. I do not believe that Joe Biden fairly and legally won the 2020 election. I believe that if everything was fair and square and on the up and up, Trump would have, the result of that election would have been Trump completing his second term beginning in 2020. Now, many of you just reached to turn me off, right? Or mentally wrote me off. Don't do it. Don't do it. You need to hear some facts, or at least some perspective that are coming from the other side. Ultimately, if the truth is on your side, you have nothing to fear from what I have to say to you anyway, right? So how about you listen for a change to what I have to say? Now, I know a lot of us, a lot of Americans who don't believe that 2020 had any, but who believe that 2020 was a perfect, secure election. A lot of you believe that the doubts that Americans are grappling with concerning election integrity right now come from things that Trump have said, right? That it is that Trump's rhetoric is the reason why we have anybody in America who's concerned about election integrity. I know a lot of you believe this because a lot of you have said it, either to me directly or in other places where I was listening. But I need you to get that idea out of your head. That is simply not factual. All right. Al Gore challenged the results of the 2000 election. After the Supreme Court ruled on it, he stopped talking about it. But he definitely believed, or at least said he believed, and acted as if he believed, that election was stolen from him. And an even more intense example of election deniers on the left is in 2016. Hillary Clinton and the American left never stopped claiming that Russia stole that election for Donald Trump. You can find people who speak this way today. If you don't believe me, you can look this stuff up for yourself. But you don't have to, because you remember it. I know you do, if you're willing to. You remember the Russia collusion narrative. You remember the Russia collusion investigations. And you remember when Hillary Clinton said, quote, "You can run the best campaign. You can even become the nominee, and you can have the election stolen from you." Hillary Clinton, direct quote from 2019. And if you still don't believe me, use AI and look up, did Hillary Clinton and the American left continue to question the results of 2016 presidential election years after the election took place? You'll find the information there. So I need you to, if we're going to understand each other on this and learn from each other on this and grow from each other on this at all, I need you to get rid of the idea that election questions, election integrity concerns only started because of something that Trump said or something that Trump did on January 6th. Okay? That is simply not true. So let's move on from that. The world in which we live right now, as far as the election integrity belief in the United States, you have one side of the political aisle, the left, who believes and continues to argue largely that the 2016 election was stolen by Russia. And you have a large amount of the political right who believes or suspects that something or someone stole or affected the 2020 election. There's a lot more diversity of opinions about this on the right, which is normal. The American political right has a far more diverse spectrum of ideas than the American political left. But for example, right, this is a great example. There are a lot of us on the right who don't believe that 2020 was stolen, or at least say we don't. And then there are a lot of different explanations for what we would mean by that, even if we would agree by that statement. Some of us, would put the blame more on China. Some of us would put it on Biden. Some of it would put it on blue states and blue governors, right? But the fact of the matter is, almost half of the political spectrum believes that 2016 was unsecure, and almost the other half of the political perspective believes that 2020 was unsecure. Still, both sides to this day. So we have a situation here where a lot of us are not confident in our elections at large. Now, I'm not trying to convince you that 2020 was stolen. If you don't believe that right now, then you're probably never going to, and that's fine. You can believe what you want. What I am suggesting to you today is, instead of presenting an argument of why I think 2020 was stolen, I am trying to present to you solutions so that I don't have to worry about what I believe happened in 2020 ever happening again. And so that you don't have to worry about what you might believe happened in 2016 ever happening again. Right? This is a path forward that isn't actually controversial at all. The only reason you think it is because you've been lied to about the potential solutions. You've been lied to about the potential problems. And unfortunately for you, the people who oppose these common sense solutions are your political heroes. So stick with me here, and hopefully you'll see what I mean. Now, I'm going to talk briefly about some of the things that Trump said is going on. I imagine most of you have heard it by now. He said that China, around the 2020 election, stole 220 million U.S. voters' information from 18 different states. That was one of his key points. Another one was that voting machines and counting systems are vulnerable. Another is that there are hundreds of thousands of non-citizens currently on our voting rolls, meaning they are registered to vote as if they were of legal voting citizenship status here in the United States, when they are, for one reason or another, in fact, not legally qualified to vote in federal elections. So let's camp on that one for a minute. Non-citizen voters, right? Or illegal voters. DHS, Department of Homeland Security, if you don't believe Trump or the intelligence communications that he has unclassified. The Department of Homeland Security did a review and they found 287,000 registered voters who were flagged, right, as of great concern. The initial review said these are non-citizens that are registered to vote in federal elections. Interestingly, almost half of them were in California. But Pennsylvania, where I live, did make the list of the top 4 that he looked at, the Department of Homeland Security looked at most closely. Pennsylvania got flagged for having over 14,000 voters who were initially matched as being illegally registered to vote. I find those numbers concerning. I would imagine anyone who cares about a fair election would. But I think the most eye-opening element of what Trump talked about, what Trump focused on, was not the non-citizens on the voter rolls, although that's a huge deal. What Trump said, and what others have pointed out in the aftermath of Trump's speech, really opened my eyes to the fact that the profiling and influence campaign from foreign governments, the size and the scope and the money that is going into the effort to not only influence American voters, but profile them so that they can be effectively influenced. How much of this is going on, and how much of this is coming from foreign governments? I was shocked to realize the extent of this. As President Trump said, 220 million U.S. voters' information was stolen by China in a presidential election year. That is a huge deal. That's a huge deal. That's a lot of information illegally obtained by the enemy, the primary geopolitical enemy of our nation, in one of the most contentious election cycles during my lifetime. Right? Dan Bongino, I talk about him a lot on this show because he's a good source to find truth, and in this case, he had direct eyes on the intelligence information, the intelligence communications and briefings that President Trump declassified. Right? Dan Bongino served as the deputy director of the FBI during the process of them digging up the information that President Trump, from other intelligence sources, that President Trump has just classified and referenced. He was a big part. He was a key figure in rolling back this cover-up that Trump described, because that was another one of Trump's key points. Not just that this was going on, but that intelligence agencies knew about it and were not taking the proper steps to address it. In fact, they were hiding it, actively hiding it. But Bongino went a step further. Former director, FBI deputy director Dan Bongino went a step further in describing the stuff that Trump has now declassified. He described this information harvest by China as China building a portfolio on you, the individual American, better than your parents have. And he continued to emphasize over and over how prevalent this foreign influence really is. So the Chinese Communist Party, folks, is paying for ways to influence you that are tailored to you individually, specifically, based on the data that they have illegally stolen and just harvested, right? Sometimes legally, sometimes illegally. They can create an individual profile on you that will allow them to combine that information with the voter information and hard data that they have stolen on you to see how they can influence your opinions about elections. That's terrifying to me. Now, you, you can take this information and ignore it, or choose to believe that it is false, or that it doesn't constitute evidence for what Trump is claiming is happening, even though he has declassified the documents and you can go and read them for yourself. This may not be enough to be concerning to you. I may not be able to convince you that there's reason to be concerned over the fragility of our election integrity. But, and that's okay, right? You're allowed to think that, and I realize that's a reach for some people. But here's what I want to do. Like I said at the beginning, I'm not trying to backtrack and convince you that 2020 was stolen. I'm trying to convince you to look ahead and see if I can get you to do, or so to support two things that will harden our elections and our election security moving forward, regardless of whether or not you believe what Trump says about 2020. There's some things that I need you to do, and that I need Americans in general to get better at, and to move a couple of balls that I need you to move forward so we don't have to worry about this anymore. Number one is just recognize that there are lots of foreign people with way more information, foreign governments with way more information on you than you would think, and way more ability than you would think to tailor messages for you specifically. Realize that there is a ton of this information persuasion, information warfare psyop going on. Just even if you just open your mind to the fact that this happens, and happens a ton, that would be beneficial in and of itself, right? Because then you're more willing to take some action steps to protect yourself against it. You may not like this, but one of the best things I believe you can do to protect yourself against individually targeted foreign psyops against you, one of the best ways to avoid that is artificial intelligence, which is ironic because artificial intelligence is one of the tools that makes this not psychological, but information warfare so effective. It can also be one of the things that renders it ineffective, because it is very hard, just by the definition of what artificial intelligence databases, search engines are. It is very hard to make one of these things that lies. There are some that have a lot of woke influence in them and woke parameters, but even them, if you are able and willing to ask the right questions, even the most slanted ones you can find will eventually give you the facts, right? Because if AI doesn't regurgitate actual documented facts, then it will be out of business in a very short order. That is not true for any other form of media. In fact, most other forms of media benefit from giving you information that is false, either because they have a narrative or because they have a funding motivation. Maybe they work for someone who signs a paycheck who has that bias that they want presented. Maybe they got hired by the foreign influencer people who are hiring somebody to present a narrative. Some of them probably don't even realize that the people who are paying them to tell their story are selling foreign agitprop, right? But the fact of the matter is, most media actually benefits from communicating to you something that is less than true or is outright false. AI does not. AI benefits from being accurate. The more accurate an AI is, the more likely it is to be used. So what I am asking you to do, number one, is to use AI more when you search for information. Grok something, Chat GTP, whatever, Google Gemini, whatever it is. So far, you will find those AIs to be far less slanted than most media sources. And now that we are living in a world where foreign governments are actively targeting you individually and putting a lot of money behind it to try to convince you of something, you are going to need the most unbiased information that you can get. The other thing I'm asking for you to do is to think about the Save America Act, right? Again, a line that will push a lot of leftists instinctively towards the off button. But listen to me. Listen to me. In a world where half of us believe 2016 was stolen and the other half of us believe that 2020 is stolen, don't you think that it would be beneficial for the security of our elections and our peace of mind over it if people did not come here illegally? And if they did, they would have to go. That's what I'm asking for. Don't you think it would be beneficial in this world where half of us believe that 2016 was stolen, the other half believe that 2020 was stolen? In that world, don't you think it would be beneficial for you to have to rigorously prove that you are a U.S. citizen when you register to vote? And in that world, don't you think that it would be beneficial to show that you are who you say you are when you go to cast your vote via photo ID? These are not controversial measures. Now, I know a lot of you are screaming things that there's, those of you on the left are screaming that there's more to the Save America Act. And yes, there is some, like limits on no excuse mail-in voting. And, again, to me, that's a pretty common sense election integrity measure. How many of you would be willing to send $1,000 in the mail? Well, if you're not willing to spend $1,000 in the mail, then why would you send your ballot in the mail, right? The only way that I am sending a ballot in the mail is if I have no other choice. And some voters are like that. And I have encouraged those voters to send their ballot by mail, right? Because I can tell talking to this person that it's mail or nothing. And so you may as well send the mail-in ballot, right? As the rules exist, I'm going to give the unlikely voter every opportunity that they can to vote, even if I believe that voting by mail is more susceptible to fraud. The fraud is not going to get better if no Republicans use it. No Republicans not use fraud. The mail-in fraud is not going to get better if no Republicans vote by mail. The only way that mail-in fraud is going to get better is if we change how we do mail-in voting. So in the meantime, if I find a Republican who's unlikely to vote, you better believe that I'm going to present to him the mail-in option, because then maybe he will cast his vote. And then at least there's a chance that his vote is in when there is no chance that his vote is in if he has to vote on election day. But I digress a little bit. The other thing that a lot of people will throw out there against the Save America Act is that it disenfranchises minorities, poor people, and women. The only way that is true is if you believe that women, poor people, or minorities are somehow incapable of documenting their own existence, of presenting and proving their own identities. Personally, I find that offensive. I do not believe that women are incapable of proving their own citizenship. I do not believe that minorities or poor people are incapable of proving their own citizenship. And remember, if you're already registered to vote, you don't even have to prove your own citizenship. Not under the Save America Act. You don't. You would have to present photo ID when you voted. Folks, this is not a lot to ask. Most of us believe that one election or another was stolen. Most of our voters, anyway. Or at least a lot of us do. All I'm asking for is the kind of thing that you have to do to buy a can of spray paint in Pennsylvania, right? Photo ID when you cast your vote, proof of citizenship when you register to vote. You can't come here illegally, and if you do, you have to go. And if that sounds like extremist racism, Nazi fascism, then the problem is more in your brain than in my opinions. Now, before we go, I want to have a little fun. Our first movie review on the Caleb Landis Show. I love going to the theater. I don't get to go very often because I have little kids. You don't take little kids into theaters too often. And if you do, it's Probably not a movie that I would really want to see anyway. Although I like a lot of kids movies, but I just don't have a lot of time to go to the theater. Don't have a lot of money to go to the theater. So I don't know how often we'll do this, but when I get a chance, maybe we'll do a movie review from time to time. Let me know if you like it. You'd like to hear more movie reviews as we go. The one that I did get to see and I did get to take my oldest kid to was Young Washington. I was afraid I wouldn't like it very much. I wasn't super enthused by the looks and the presentation of the guy who they had playing young Washington in the trailers. Don't know anything about the actors, just something about the look. And Angel Studio has had some strikeouts in movies, right? Who produce Young Washington. They've had some really good ones, they've had some really bad ones. But it was more good than bad recently. And I really loved the idea. So I went to go see it. Turns out the guy who plays Washington, his name is William Frankly Miller. He did pretty good. He did pretty good. You know, he wasn't the best actor on screen, but he also wasn't distractingly bad, as sometimes happens in these low budget films, right? I'd give him a solid 7. Um, I really like a movie that has really interesting, really engaging supporting characters. Young Washington had that. Andy Serkis and Kelsey Grammer and Ben Kingsley were unsurprisingly great in their roles. And frankly, I wish that Andy Serkis and Kelsey Grammer could have more screen time. But that's not unusual. I really like both of those actors. I like Ben Kingsley usually too, and all three of them were home run hitters on this. Fascinating to watch as characters. There were others too. I had to dig deep to find the names of a couple of people who've played Washington's friends, Leo Hanna and looks like Martin Lakemeyer. Not sure how you pronounce that last name. It's Martijn, I believe. Martin, maybe. Anyway, my point is there were a lot of interesting people, right, around Washington on screen throughout the movie. And it made the movie entertaining. The action sequences were good, but and like I said, Washington was solid, right? But what what I liked most about the movie was actually the kind of person that the movie created for young Washington, right? I don't know if I should give this credit to the script writers or to the directors or the producers or to the actor, probably a little bit of all the above, right? But so often when you have hero movies, particularly historical, particularly American historical figures, and they make movies about these people that aren't just a retelling of what they're famous for, so often movie makers fall into the trap of making this hero relatable. And in my experience, relatable is just Hollywood code for we are going to make this person much less likable and much less exceptional. Whether we have facts to support this interpretation of this historical figure or not, because we don't like what the person stood for. Right? We like to remove exceptional people from American history. So we're going to do it under the guise of the untold part of George Washington's life or to make him human, right? To make him relatable. Now, young Washington in the film, young Washington was human and he was relatable. That's the whole point of the movie. His early failures, right? Maybe not the whole point, but the whole setting of the movie. He was not portrayed as a marble bust or a stiff painting somewhere in a museum hall that wasn't even a real person and therefore has little to no bearing on real life or how I should live my life. He was not portrayed that way at all. He was not unrealistic. In fact, he was extremely realistic. But there was no bias against American history leading Angel Studios to try to make Washington as unexceptional as possible, or to try to get in a bunch of snide remarks, virtue signaling, woke jabs about American history. That wasn't happening either. Young Washington, the character, was very believable as a person who was not yet as great as he was going to be, but who you could see becoming one of the greatest people of all time. Great people don't just wake up great one day. They learn how to be great. They become great. Now, it is true that people who have done great things have spent most of the rest of their lives not doing great things. But not someone like George Washington. He didn't meet just one moment, he met an entire era, right? There was something different, exceptional about George Washington. That kind of exceptional person builds and develops over their lifetime. And that is what you could see so well in the Young Washington movie. And that's one of the reasons why I liked it so much. So we're going to stop there. We're a little long for today, but I hope you get a chance to go see Young Washington if you haven't yet. Thank you for watching this episode. Please like and subscribe to the channels here on Rumble, YouTube, or Facebook. Share this with your friends. Comment below. It all helps. Spread the message. God bless you. God bless America. We'll see you next time.